This meeting is being
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our software development Ask Me Anything. We're just having a little bit of technical difficulties on our end here, so hopefully this works. Surabhi, hello.
Hey Manur, can you hear me now?
Yes, finally.
Okay, that's great. That's great. So it does show me two options. It
Yeah.
says I can join as a panelist or I can stay as an attendee.
Can you try joining as a panelist, please, so we can have your
Yes,
camera turned on?
yes, let me try that. All right, so I joined as a panelist now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, that's amazing. There's
Yes.
Hey,
Hello. So good to see you.
thank you. Thanks for helping me through that.
Of course, thank you so
Great
much.
to be
And thank
here.
you, everyone, for being patient with us. I'll get started really quickly with the event. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Mahnur, and I'm the Partnership Development Specialist here at CircuitStream. We are a tech education provider, and we have courses for adults that run throughout the year. And we host them in topics like product management, software development, game design, game development. And we've currently just started a new program that starts next month. It's called our AI Builders Bootcamp. So it's for those that are already in the industry and just looking to build up their AI skills. And this is a short course that we're hosting as well. And we partner up with universities like U of T, University of British Columbia, UBC, and then McGill, and then a few in the States as well. And we're really excited to kind of host this AMA Ask Me Anything with Surabhi. And I'll give the stage to Surabhi. Introduce yourself a little bit, tell us who you are, and then we'll go from there.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Manur. So hey everyone. For those of you who might already be in the industry or those of you who might be getting started, I'm assuming that we have a diverse set of folks here today. Yeah. So I'm going to share a bit of my background and also um, share a bit of what I'm currently doing. And based on that, whoever has questions, we can try our best to go through them. I promise that if I don't know everything, I will still get back to Mehnur with whatever resources I can find after the call. And without further ado, let me introduce myself. So, my name is Surabhi, and I'm based out of Washington, Seattle. Currently, I'm a senior software engineer at Microsoft in one of the cloud Azure organizations. And I've been part of the software industry since this AMA is about software. A little bit of intro there. I've been part of the industry for about 9 years now. And out of those 9 years, it's been a mix of developing low-level software, a little bit of application layer software, mostly backend, all over the place. And then since last year, there's been a good accelerated amount of AI-assisted development, going further into native AI, agentic development, context engineering, and so on. And so that's a little bit of my background, and also happy to answer any questions or anything you're trying to navigate at the moment. Because most likely, in my experience, I've observed that for the last couple of years, all of us have very similar questions about where is the industry going? How are things changing with respect to AI? How's my job going to change, right? So that brings me to this conversation. I have navigated a lot of my industry career with the help of mentors and happy to give back. Yeah.
That's so sweet, Surabhi. It's really nice kind of just listening about your experiences and where you currently work. I wanted to ask, tell us a little bit about your career journey from what that was like, kind of starting as like a intern at, at a junior level and then going all the way up to where you currently are. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, absolutely. This will probably date me, but like back when I started as an intern almost a decade ago, it was majorly at the moment, it was majorly through my master's program experience and the curriculum. Because when I came to this country in 2015, I did not have any prior experience or any background as an industry professional. And since my master's was in a relevant background around computer networking, that was my first role as an intern at Lenovo data center team. Um, and in the very first role, when I joined, the work was mostly kind of like think of it as me assisting an existing scientist in the company. So my work literally was running the tests, writing automation or scripting for the tests to check out all the storage in cloud and their performance. In a nutshell, it would look like every morning I would meet with my then supervisor, and I would ask him what kinds of tests we want to run today, right? So you can see, like, I'm not looking at the industry. I'm mostly trying to learn what is the team trying to do. And I was actually trying to automate a lot of their testing infrastructure. So that was my job as an intern. And also, like all the intern funny stories, I did break the setup that I created once big time. It took me a week to recover it. However, I learned a lot from that whole experience because it forced me to look at other companies that Lenovo was trying to leverage, like, in their data center infra. So that was my journey. A lot of it, in that first job, my supervisor was also my mentor because I didn't have a lot of network, right? It was kind of like new to me. And slowly, because they needed ongoing support and they liked my work, it converted into an ongoing co-op. For those of you who are not familiar with co-op, you kind of like continue on part-time even as you study, with the company, and you're getting paid part-time. You're also doing your education on the side. Yeah.
Nice. It was just a very average intern experience to break something. It's a rite of
Yep.
passage for all interns to break whatever they built.
Absolutely.
But you know what? It's such a good learning experience, and it's good to break stuff at that level and then learn how to fix it or what not to do so that when you're a little bit older and kind of, more settled into your career, you know not to make those mistakes. And so you're just very careful every time you press the publish or deploy button.
Absolutely. Yes. I looking back, like on all the initial experiences, I do think it helps a lot in gathering that sandbox environment where you can learn and you can try and experiment things quite faster. After that, wherever I worked were hyperscalers. And so anything I break could cause an outage globally, like worldwide.
Oh,
And so
wow.
that is non-forgivable, right? And so it helps a lot to think about how do you add guardrails and how do you create sandboxes to continue doing your work faster, but not break the production. Yeah.
That sounds very interesting. Do you feel like you deal with a lot of maybe in when you were starting your career out, do you feel like you dealt with a lot of imposter syndrome when you were kind of going through all of these, that one small mistake and then the entire world is just sitting abrupt?
Absolutely. If I'm being honest, I actually feel it even today. So imposter syndrome, in a nutshell, is kind of like that feeling inside where you feel like you could be doing better, you could be doing more, like you could be learning more from other people. Look at you, there are smart people all around, right? And so what happens is as the career progresses, of course, when you're starting off, I wouldn't have enough benchmarks or data points to know where I stand. And so any small thing goes by, the impact would be a little bit larger. And that's the imposter syndrome we are talking about, because everyone around you has more experience in the industry, and you don't know enough to know what's right, where do you stand, and so on. As the career progresses, the feeling would still stay if you continue to grow. It is just that the scope gets wider and wider. And so now, today, when I look at my work, um, I have enough data points to understand what is serious, what is not serious. However, the scope has increased. So there are always times where I would feel like I don't know anything. With AI, that landscape has also changed in twofold. For learning new things, it's actually gotten very fast and really great. And at the same time, because AI can build so many things for us now, understanding what are the right questions to ask and like having that taste, that has become the new learning. But yes, starting off in the career, there is a good amount of that overwhelm. Um, Pretty much every single project when we are doing it, because we don't even know how to rate our work or like how to review ourselves, right?
Amazing. Yeah, it's with every career path, right?
Yep.
Looking back, kind of now that you are and you have better 2020 bias, hindsight vision, what would you have done differently as a student that was kind of coming into the software world?
One of the things that would be done differently is right from the get-go. As a student, we build a lot of projects, which is great because we are learning a lot. One of the things personally I would do better, and that I started like doing better over the years, was to also have kind of like an ongoing learning group, or people think of it as cohort in a way where you can learn from each other's experiences. And those things exist even within corporate now, sometimes as mentorings or like, different initiatives. But it really helps because that's the best way to convert that imposter syndrome or like anxiety into something actionable where you continue building and developing your skills and you continue to actually learn from others as well. I think when we are students, we are so busy just like doing the work that it's hard to look at the bigger picture at the time. And I think it's very important. It's just like how in the finance world, people advise on investing starting in your early age. And in my early age, I would be thinking, I don't have enough money. Like, how do I start it? Right? But it doesn't need to be a lot. I would always think of building the support system quite early on.
That's a really good answer. And it's really helpful to rely on other people sometimes that are maybe in a career path that you want to go towards, but you're not sure. So you can lean on them and ask if that's the right move for you as well.
Yes.
What advice would you give to someone that's trying to land their first developer job in today's market with everything kind of shifting and then with everything that's going on? You know this way better than I do.
I would say specifically, like there are two different scenarios. There are scenarios where it's the first ever job, like for software developers, and they're fresh out of college, right? That scenario has changed quite significantly compared to someone who was already like part of the industry and now is going through sort of like this revamping of their existing role, right? Like how it changes with AI. In my observation, um, I have actually seen that because the market just got extremely competitive with ongoing shifts, some of the ways for software developers to stay relevant and visible started mattering more since the last year. So folks who have been building projects on their own and also keeping them public in a way, like if you have your own GitHub repository, that's one way to have your work published, right? And that's not waiting on someone else to kind of like come and give you a project. And I know in the beginning it feels like, is it worth the effort? But trust me, like the question is rather like, if I were to stay relevant in the industry, how do I do that? So one way is like building our own projects, right? Specifically for developers, if not already, I would highly recommend looking at the Claude, or like essentially all the frontier model companies have their own certifications or learnings to stay updated, right? That will get you to the learning part, but not the networking part. But that's actually useful in terms of like building your own stuff. And I would also suggest keeping an eye on the market in terms of where you want to go. So there are preferences within software developers among like, do you want to join a startup at like, an early stage company, or do you want to join a big tech company? I would say if someone's looking at startups or early stage companies, continue looking at companies who have recently raised funds. That is actually like the best angle or like the best shot for someone who's looking for their first break. Um, and also because in those interviews and in those places, again, whatever you've built on your own does show your initiative. I would highly recommend doing that. For big tech, in my observation, um, the hiring has decreased for recent college grads. However, for FY 27, the hiring pools would have opened actually, I think recently now. So they would have started hiring. So if anyone is looking to apply an interview, now is actually a great time to go and research if those companies have opened their roles. I know, like big tech companies, they've gone through freeze in the past few months. If that freeze were to lift up, now is the time. So I wouldn't wait until I feel like fully ready. I would essentially go and get try my shot out. Yeah.
That's some really good advice that you gave with building your projects, kind of building up your own skill set, and then using that as your advantage if you're applying to whatever industry or whatever company size that you're interested in. Again, I think a lot of companies are just kind of looking at some of the job descriptions that have been up. One of the things I see is like what your skills are like as a builder, and then if you can take accountability. Those two are the key things that I see everywhere, and they go very well with what you mentioned as well, for sure.
Absolutely.
If For all the students that we have here in the chat, if you have any questions, feel free to just drop them, raise your hand, and then we'll make sure that we're answering them. But I wanted to ask that in the world of computer science, where everything is heading and software development, all of that, do you think a degree is still necessary and kind of that traditional pathway that we were told pre-COVID? Do you think that still exists, or boot camps or these certifications can help graduates get to, a working job essentially?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to split that into there are two different questions. One is the latter half part about do boot camps, crash courses, certifications, do they help, right? Um, that second question is easier to answer. I'll take that shot first. Yes, they absolutely help. And think of it as even if, let me take a simple analogy. If I buy a house today, it's almost kind of like asking like, hey, do you think like, keeping the house kind of like fresh and updated and like refurbish it every few years or so, changing the roof, all of that, like, does that help? Of course it helps. It's kind of like our way of staying relevant with the market, right? Even me as a software developer, what I used to do a few years ago and what I do now is actually like very different in terms of how I operate, right? And especially with the rise of AI, it's changed a lot. So you would see that the big giants can't move at that speed of upskilling every single person at that speed, right? And our career is our responsibility. So at any point of time, yes, doing these courses once in a while, and also finding your own group of people with whom you continue to build, with whom you continue to grow, it's very essential because our career is essentially like our responsibility in a way. And that's how you also find out what's going on in the industry. Okay. So the answer to the second question, absolutely yes. The first one about college degree, I would say it's a very subjective question. Last year I visited Bay Area, San Francisco for a little while, and I saw a surge of companies built with AI. Even non-technical founders like building their own companies and then going and forming a team and so on. I also saw a lot of people um, kind of like building up their own solutions and running with that, right? Now, in their case, because they had so much of this leverage with all the tooling, which we all have, by the way, like in this stage, um, I wouldn't think necessarily that going through university was their best like golden leverage. For them, it was the network they had built and the creativity in leveraging that with AI. However, working with a group of people and studying together, learning, that always helps, whether you do it one way or the other, right? So I think there is no replacement to that because the workforce is still humans in a way. And on a daily basis, we continue to work with teams. So you can't replace that part. And in my opinion, whether that part for you is, the college or the university, or whether it is the boot camps you go through, whichever way it is, it's important. In terms of the value of the degree itself, again, it varies. I do think that a lot of, like, especially for development, a lot of the work is being automated. However, even as today, what I ship is actually my responsibility. I cannot blame AI for making mistakes in production, right? And that happens naturally to us humans because when we see like these tools doing great job, like we might be relying on them too much, but the responsibility is on us. And I think that fundamental skill of developing the right judgment, asking the right questions, navigating through ambiguity and unknowns, that's extremely crucial. So again, whether you do it through university courses or otherwise, keeping in mind that that's an extremely important skill is very important. Some of the companies I know, in terms of the job descriptions, like speaking very practically, I do see that the companies, especially like at least big tech, I do see that they do have requirements on the relevant degree, right? So keep that in mind of like doing a bit of research on that front.
Okay. I really like that answer. It was very well versed, and I love the analogy of keeping your house up to date, and that's kind of our responsibility. And
Yes, absolutely.
yeah, you have to upskill yourself no matter what industry you're in, especially right now with the change in AI. If you're stuck in your old ways, it can really just impact you in a not very positive way. So it's good to keep yourself up to date no matter what you're doing.
Absolutely.
What is one of the coolest projects you've worked on?
So for me, one of the coolest projects I've worked on, there are actually a couple. One of them has been a project where I was able to build a developer tooling end to end for almost like our entire org within EC2 networking. So this was a team at AWS I worked with, and we had a lot of pain points around testing our code changes, right? So there are lots of developers and they're trying to test their code changes and they're stuck because there are not enough machines. So like I said, I worked close to low level or like, back-end infrastructure engineering. And when there aren't enough machines, two things happen. There is a lot of bottleneck on we are writing code but can't test it. If you can't test it, you can't ship it into production because any mistake could cause outages, right, in the infrastructure. So we got to develop Bootstrap, a super awesome lab, trying to test like, those features and then make it kind of like scalable. So every other developer in the org could use it. And through that experience, it forced me to think a lot about how do you work with cross-functional teams? How do you understand their requirements? And how do you modularize your work as a software developer? And how, like, even within software development, there is one part of technical deep dive, understanding the system, building the code. And then there is second part of understanding what do your stakeholders need and how do you prioritize the work, right? How do you find as simple as like finding a place for the lab? It was actually, you would think it's very obvious, but it was not, because it took a lot of compliance and regulations in place. That was one of the coolest projects I built, because initially what was a pain point for me and my team then turned into a product for the whole like organization. And the other one I want to talk about is a little bit more about product and customer. Um, so this was back when I was working, like in my first full-time role at Intel. We had an amazing team of engineers and also, like the customer support and a lot of mentors because we had so many industry experts helping us learn about the product. And we were on this mission of going through an entire product launch, a new product launch for Intel. And like any other product launch, it will go through its own, set of challenges and opportunities to grow in that same space. So one of the coolest experiences through that was analyzing lots and lots of customer support tickets from older products, earlier generations, to literally understand what are the pain points and what are the challenges customers are running into when they use our product, right? And then redesigning those parts and pieces for the new product launch, which then resulted into better revenue and better customer adoption. Again, one of the ways to understand the impact of the work we do as software developers, the best ways is actually to kind of like get some customer perspective, right? So that was cool.
That sounds so. How long did it take you guys to build this out?
I would say the first part where I talked about the product launch, it was like an ongoing process where the entire product launch itself was a 1.5 year process.
Oh,
And
wow.
part of it was this whole analysis, right? So we rebuilt an entire testing system to make sure that customers don't have to run into issues and tell us, but rather like we proactively catch it, right? Now it's a very standard process. Back then it was not.
Nice. That sounds so cool. Wow, it's amazing. Um, you've been taught. It's going to be my last question. I know we have to end it a little bit earlier today, but just a
Mhm.
question that I have. Kind of, you've been mentioning this, but there's a lot of talk about network, building your network, all of that related stuff. What does that look like? What does that really mean? And how do you start that essentially before you're even in the world of software development?
Yeah. One of the most beautiful things about this whole part of network is that doesn't require you to have any experience, no degree, no nothing. You're actually unblocked. And that also makes it tricky for some people because it feels, yeah, it kind of feels like this black box and I don't know how to break through that, right? Um, so for folks here who are new to this aspect or like haven't built their own network or like are wondering if I'm not in the industry, how do I even build it? Um, can you help me understand if folks on the call are from Washington State or like from different places so I can answer better?
They're from different places. So we have students here that are from BC, Vancouver, Toronto, Ontario, just a variety of different places.
Gotcha. Okay, I think then I can answer it like better suited for like overall, right? On a high level, you want to think about um, the career path you see for yourself. You always want to hang out with the people who are two steps ahead of you. That's just a very general principle to follow. And doing so will almost guarantee progression in that direction because there's like you're actually channeling all of your attention and you're learning from those people. So now let's translate that down to software development because it's not different anymore. In terms of software development, if I were to look at places where I could go learn from people who are ahead of me, and when I look at them, I'm like, oh my God, how did you do that? Like, let me, right, ask a few questions. The places I would think of or go to, even if I have no connections whatsoever, would actually be places like the webinars you're hosting. If you don't have access to in-person events, it would be like online events, right? The webinars where you can connect with other people. It would also be places where people are hosting hackathons. A lot of the times, going through hackathons is a great way to meet other people who also want to build a solution. And then because you built it, you get to keep it public. So that's your GitHub, right? And it also gives you visibility because you participated in something. I would highly, highly encourage that. It doesn't matter whether you feel confident or you don't. It really doesn't matter because you're there to actually like learn and build something and have fun along the way, right? Um, Other places I would recommend is also going through. Last week there was Seattle Tech Week within Seattle. So if you're part of a major city, I can guarantee that there is some kind of like tech fest or tech week happening, right? And you don't have to go meet every single person, every single event during those events. What you can do is just have a target for yourself that you're going to meet three people today, right? And you're going to actually understand what is their workflow in the industry. You're going to understand how did they break into a particular company or industry? What was their interview process like, right? So imagine it's like having coffee chats with people. And this is helpful no matter what stage of career, but it's especially helpful when you're not in the industry because we have to work extra hard at that point in building that from scratch.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Surabhi, for answering all of my questions here. And thank you so much for letting me pick your brain a little bit today. It was so interesting to learn from you.
Thanks, Mehnur. Thank you so much. And if folks have questions, feel free to share them offline as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Surabhi. And I hope you all have a lovely rest of your weekend. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me and we can go from there. Bye, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.